Tervetuloa seuraamaan Maailmankuvia-sarjaa. Tänään minulla on ilo ja kunnia haastatella Kinsellaa, joka on brittiläinen kirjailija sekä myöskin selvänäkijä. Tervetuloa tähän ohjelmaan. Welcome to this show, Kinsella.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm very honored to be here.
Well, I'm just made a short introduction that you are an author and you are clairvoyant, but what else you are? Where is your origin? What is your background?
Yes, well, that's a very interesting area like most of our lives. My twin brother and I, because I have an identical twin brother, and people assume that because these things happened to us that there was something unique about being twins. I disagree. I think the phenomena occurs and connects with anyone. But my brother and I grew up on a mansion grounds in Bignell House, which is in Chester in Bicester. And the mansion was owned by Dr. Thomas Gregory, who was an eye surgeon. And some very strange things happened because my mother was a servant and a cleaner for the family, and we lived on the property. And of course, as kids, we thought we were rich, and we weren't. We were allowed access to the grounds, but it was there that some truly extraordinary things happened to us. Mm-hmm. And this then led on to a lifelong of experiences. One of those I remembered most distinctly. Upon the grounds in Bignell House, one morning I found myself seeing a big yellow tractor in the middle of a small wood, and wondering how I got where I was on the property in the morning, and that there couldn't possibly be a big yellow normal-sized tractor sitting in a wood because it just felt like it had been plonked there. And there was another experience that I've documented where one Sunday morning or Saturday morning, because I knew that our grandparents were coming up to visit us on the grounds, this morning was very foggy. There was a smell like cheesy cardboard. Mm. And I found myself out of my room, wondering how I was outside again. And there was a small grey standing by my left, and making me aware of like, well, you're here, but you should be in there. And I thought, well, I'm going to be in trouble because I shouldn't be here. Mm. So the area, I think, wasn't just primarily an area of high strangeness, because research and UFO investigator Kathleen Marden from America was interested in mine and my brother's case. And she did a little bit of historical background about Bignell House to see if it was haunted. And of course, she couldn't find any. But we do know that the ascendants of Sir Francis Drake had built the property. Mm. So it's evident that with anyone that's connected with these areas of high strangeness, whether we term it ufology or cryptozoology or paranormal, seems to connect with the individual.
Mm. Well, now it's a perfect time to tell the audience that you are actually also UFO researcher, and you have been just giving lecture in Tampereen seminary in Finland, and your topic was about abductions and that kind of things. What you have gone through by yourself. And,
yes.
But how about that family where you came? Is this kind of clairvoyance skill or something like this? Did it came from a family, from example from your
yes,
parents?
yes, understood. Yes, well, it's only later when we start to all evolve and grow that when these things happen to you, it's not because you're making things fit. It's because you're putting the dots together. As David Icke says, the dot connector. And our maternal grandmother was psychic, and she didn't work on stage or anything like that, but she knew a lot of things, and the family knew that she was a little bit spooky. And when my brother and I had been aged 13, and they lived in Middlesex in a big house, and one summer's evening, my brother and I and our grandmother, we were young, was presented with a silver orb that came through in broad daylight over the property and over her. And that was very spooky. And of course, at that point, if someone said, well, you know, what you've seen is a UFO, as kids, we thought that UFOs were bigger. But we now understand that my grandmother was psychic and that this object had been drawn to her and was obviously interested in her twin grandsons. And it wasn't later until after I had an initial abduction, a UFO alien abduction, back in the winter of 1989, that after that event, and primarily doing the research in UFOs, I then found that I started to become psychic when my maternal grandmother passed over. It seemed to activate in me. Okay. I know I had it as a kid, and it's not like, well, anyone can claim anything, can't they? And I have to point out for the record that I was very grounded, very stringent, in fact, too harsh in my terminology of how things worked. But when my grandmother died, she was like another mother to me and my twin brother. She had actually come to me the night that she died, even though she was in a Somerset hospital. They'd moved to Somerset many years later, and we'd seen her a week before, and we were in Bedfordshire, Kempston, Bedfordshire, and we'd seen her. She was dying of cancer, and her voice came in my head saying, because I became upset in the early hours of the morning, why are you crying? Why are you crying? And it was a shock. And then she showed me a scene in my head of her holding me and my twin brother as babies in her arms, and it went quiet, and the phone rang and she'd passed. And then I went to go and see a medium who used to work for the FBI in America, and let me tell you, she wiped the floor with me, and she said to me, you're going to be a medium in 2 years' time. I said, nope, I'm interested only in my UFO research. But 2 years later, there were synchronistic events that occurred, and then I started to train as a medium. So yes, it was linked, we think, with my grandmother, and not just on the psychic department, but also with UFOs, because we found out that an uncle of ours, that was my grandmother's daughter, oldest daughter, who they have both passed over now, her husband had seen a massive cigar-shaped UFO, because they used to live in Caister, coming out of the ocean, and all these small spheres going into it one night. And he ran home, and his wife Betty, my Auntie Betty, had to call the doctor because they thought he was having a heart attack. And this man, I've got a joke here, was the hardest, most grounded man you could ever meet. Yeah. And when he told me and my twin brother what he had seen, I nearly fell off my chair. And not only that, but my uncle Bob, his daughter, her husband, has also seen UFOs. So there seemed to be this integration of not just psychic phenomena, which I believe there are connections between consciousness and the UFO department, which we all are now looking into. And I knew that back in 1996. But it's interesting, so I agree. I think that the phenomena is intergenerational. It must be interested in a certain lines. It doesn't make us important. It doesn't make us unique, because we're all that. But when you're starting to look back, you're thinking, well, that's really strange. So, and I must joke here, I thought, well, there's the guy that's interested in UFOs, and now he talks to the dead. I thought my reputation would go straight down the pan.
Well, what happened?
Yeah, well, and we live by a system that tells us UFOs don't exist and psychic phenomena is a load of old rubbish. Well, as I've always said, I wanted to find out whether or not I was lying or the system that we serve was lying. And I think we can both kind of guess who is out of them two, you understand?
Yeah. But people has also noticed that you are quite good as a medium because you have won that mediumship award
Yes.
in back in UK. Can
Yes.
you drop few words from it?
Yes, well, I mean, it was very strange. I mean, I had no wish to become a medium, but when my maternal grandmother died, there was a deep need, and it ran so deep to find the truth of where we went, because you're touched by the singularity of the UFO phenomena. That gives us hope, because it tells us there's more to us than just flesh and blood, a biological automaton. It gives us hope. And I think that I wanted to find my grandmother because she came to me when she died. And I wanted to learn more about that. I wanted to find out where they were, you know, if there was another side. Do we transcend space-time? And I was very rigid in my analysis. I'm not a scientist, but my determination was very scientific within its nature. But I think those on the other side were kind of loosening me up a bit. So I then started to go to psychic school. And
Arthur Finlay College or something else?
No, not with Arthur Finlay. No, with groups, learning in groups. And the medium that I'd originally seen, who used to work for the FBI in America on cold soul cases, that means that the FBI would bring a sensitive in to find a body if they couldn't find it. They normally keep it quiet. Well, this medium was so good, we were linked with her, and she was half a mile away from the body of Sarah Payne, a young girl that went missing years ago. But she told the police, she's half a mile away. They found her where her body was. So I developed, and then I started doing churches, and I was booked to my eyeballs every Sunday with churches, Stevenage, Cambridge, Bedfordshire, all over. And then I got someone that got involved with me that wanted to manage me. And of course, some people commercialize it, put it in a box, you know, all this type of thing. And I wasn't really interested in that. But this thing came up, and it was about the X Factor Awards of Mediumship. It was really big in England. And I was put forward for it. And I remembered, and I'm not being cocky here, but I thought, well, that award's mine. I know I'm going to have that award. But let me tell you, it was the most rigorous award that you could ever want to try and get. Because you were tested with not just the Spiritual National Union that I have no affiliation with. These are hardened people. They were there. Tony Stockwell was there. I've worked with him on a number of occasions. He's a lovely guy. Colin Fry, I've met him. He wasn't there. But there was a panel of all these judges, even the press and the media. And it was really hair-raising. And you have to bring absolute accurate proof through. And it started off with 100, went down to 50, and then I think it was 20, then 10, and then the heat was on. So I won it. But I didn't want to work in the way that the company wanted me to work. They wanted me to go out and entertain. That wasn't my purpose. That wasn't what I wanted. So that is how I won it. But it wasn't just a case of, oh, you know, here's the award. You had to work for it. So I was put through my paces, let me tell you, and never again. But I'm an evidential medium, so I deal with facts, and I never feed, never have done, ask for a yes or a no to confirm or deny. And then that kind of led me into the exploration of how they do it from their side. What is the other side? Where is it? What conditions are we expecting when we pass over? Reincarnation, incarnation. I wanted to know all of it. But we get so very little back. But theoretically, it's interesting to assume that consciousness does survive and it's able to interlink with any one of us. And I think this whole packaging and, you know, this is the way it looks and it's glamorous and all this, I think that our understanding is very limited. And I think that it's interesting because going back to that joke about, well, there's the guy that's interested in UFOs, now he's talking to the dead. there were comparisons to be made on an interdimensional level. And the medium that I saw for the very first time just after my grandmother had passed, and I'd never been to see a medium before, only knew my grandmother as one, and she said, you'll make a connection between the psychic and UFO phenomena. And I didn't, and I was like, wow, that's awesome. And like, you know, well, that doesn't put me in a place because, you know, other people will not like that. But it was true. In 1996, with regards to the abduction that I had in 1989 that I'm not going to go into because it's too long-winded.
Yes.
But that clearly demonstrated that my idea of contact, alien contact, was very material. But in this case there were two parts. One was material and one was not, where the Greys were able to take the essence of me to them through solid matter. And I kept thinking, how was this possible? How was this possible? Spacemen here, UFOs there. And then it was like I had a download or an opening in 96. And it was about the Greys and about the soul, about consciousness, perhaps their own spiritual stagnation, their devolution, and that we as a productive species, as a humankind, have the key to what they want. It was just a theory, a possibility. And there are myriad of possibilities, myriads of ideas that we can take. We may be wrong, but we have to be open to all forms of conjecture. We have to be open to all forms of speculation. AI technology, remote influencers, remote viewers, astral projectors, interdimensional, ultra-terrestrial, the dead, demons. You know, we've got to open up to all of that. And that's what I do. So, you know, I was credited for a revolutionary theory back in 1996 that dealt primarily with the Greys, the abduction phenomena. But my idea didn't paint them in light of spacemen coming from another planet, far from it. And I think the phenomena is far more closer to home than we're being made aware of. So, in a long-winded way, yes, that's how I would answer that question.
Yes. Well, what do you think about that? If you're thinking about your mediumship and that the states of consciousness, are you trance medium or how you would define it?
No. I'm not a trance medium. I wouldn't know where to start with that. Basically, I'm just an evidential medium. So I'm clairvoyant, clairsentient. So I see to a degree and sense. It's like a motherboard. So basically, people have their own ideas and think when they go and see a medium, oh, they're going to turn up like I'm seeing you and everything's going. No, it's quite complicated. When I do a reading for someone, I will identify, first of all, I'll explain to them, first of all, the process. I just need yes or no. We can't control who comes through. And rather like a signal to a mobile phone network system, I say, just think of me as like a translator. So I'm connecting with their signals and I have to bring it in a language that we can understand, because with signals to mobile phones, we don't know they're there and we don't know what's in them until it hits the mechanism. And this is the mechanism. So my job is to translate it. So it was a struggle to understand the energies of male or female, the connections with family, the maternal side, the paternal side, names, which I don't normally deal with because anyone can throw a name out there.
Yeah.
Like, you know, John, Mary, Sue, Pete, Elizabeth. I know that's the running joke. Nokia, iPhone, Samsung, Vodafone, you get the picture. But it was the information. It was interesting to... So you go into a kind of altered state of consciousness, like slight daydreaming. People say, well, how do they communicate? Well, through the mind. It's the only way that they can communicate with us. And if we're honest with ourselves, with a human mind, all of us are not in reality 75 to 80% of the time because our mind's somewhere else.
Yeah,
the only time we're focused is when we're driving occasionally or watching a film or you're falling in love or, wow, that's got my attention. And then we slip down into that level of like not kind of like being here, and that's a good feeling, right?
So is it kind of meditative feeling all the time?
So it feels like it feels to me like when you've watched a film and you've watched it, it's intense, and you come away and you've got that kind of residue, haven't you? Like you're still seeing bits from the film. That's what it's like. So it's like just being in a slightly altered state of consciousness. and I will feel to my right, which will be to your left. The right will be the mother's side, and the left will be the father's side. And then, of course, we take it from there about how the person passed over, the conditions they were met with, their relationship to the individual that I'm reading for, any children, siblings, other connections. And normally they don't just talk about themselves, whether it's a father or a brother or a mother. And, you know, people say, oh, in mediumship, oh, I've got your nan here. And your nan loved cooking. She wore an apron and did her gardening. Please, they all did.
Yes.
I go in for the kill. I want to find out, excuse the pun, how they passed, their relationship to the individual that I'm reading for. The big mistake that people make is they think that we can solve their problems for them. We can't. They are in charge. They are the author. We have no such power other than the power of translation.
But you think this, I just want to connect this mediumship skill and also this meeting aliens and how about is this helping, kind of helping to why they choose you, because you have a mediumship that, what do you think?
I understand. A good question, a marvellous question, and one I've thought about a lot. Did the episodes of the UFO connections somehow shock me into allowing this to happen? Or was it gifted to me? I can't answer that, but what I can say to you is that it must have helped to some degree. Now, when I was younger, you know, people claim this or claim that. You'll find me black and white, grounded. I will only tell you the truth. When I was younger, I used to see things happening in my mind to do with certain family events. I'm not going to go into detail. But if I'd see something horrible and I forgot about it, it would happen. And I thought, well, am I generating this? Am I creating this? So I'd have a mantra. I used to say a mantra. Whenever I saw it, I'd say, no, God, no, never, God, never. You know, I have different ideas about God as supreme source being. I'm not talking about a man with a white beard. But then I thought, no, God, no, never, God, never, which would cancel it out. And I've wondered about whether or not, you know, what happened to me in 1989, or even back as a kid when I was 13 with my brother seeing the Foo Fighter type object over our grandmother, whether or not the shock of that had instigated something, or whether or not the intelligence behind it was wanting that to happen through to us. So now we come to a very complicated split in the road. People will tell you positive, people will tell you negative. People will tell you this or people will tell you that. We don't know, but there are two aspects to this. So this then leads to soul evolution and even deeper questions, not just about who and what we are and where we come from and why we're here, and this contact not from only being able to communicate with spirits, or them rather with us, but also draw extraterrestrial or ultra-terrestrial or interdimensional entities towards you. It is fascinating, absolutely incredible. And you, like me, struggle continuously. People think, oh, they're walking around like they know it all. I don't. Most of the time I'm in chaos about life, about what's going on out in the world, about myself, having to deal with the mediumship, having to carry the weight of the UFO situation, and then having to function in normal life. That had someone asked me a question, they said, how do you deal with it? And, you know, I said to them, you know, because we're all important, but on a personal one-to-one level, that's a good question. Another good question, I don't know how I deal with it. No wonder that I'm not in an institution somewhere.
Yeah. Well, I have another strange question that if we're thinking about that our soul might be eternal, and we might have lives, previous lives as some kind of alien somewhere else. What do you think? Is it possible that those memories or that consciousness, what we have had in previous lives as a example alien,
Yes.
could it be taken for use in this life? And can we get that knowledge, what we used to had?
That is a very good, another good question, and amazing. The last account that we had on the 9th of April 2016 with me and my brother, it has been documented and analysed with the arrival of 3 massive UFOs in triangular formation that descended. I wondered, you know, about the soul. I wondered about our connections with certain aspects of them. Like humans, we have different humans. There must be different extraterrestrial species. My research has only been linked with the greys primarily, and the reptilians to a degree, and the UFOs obviously. But I wondered, would it be amazing if they were checking up on us because we are part of their soul group, that we have incarnated into this human, and that we are trying, like yourself and many other enlightened people, to lift the vibrations here, and they're coming in to say, we're not going to tell you anything, but we just want you to know that we're here and we're looking out for you. Who knows? The thought crossed my mind. The thought also crossed my mind about, well, are they coming in because they want us to evolve on a spiritual level, if I use that word lightly, on a soul level, in the core essence of our development? And going into incarnation, reincarnation, that's very interesting. The one thing I have a problem with that, in the human sense, let's just take the human sense of incarnation, reincarnation. I believe in the extraterrestrial, it's possible because our ancestors from the past, the Egyptians, Mayan, they all knew about the star systems, Orion, Pleiades, all of that. They knew. But my idea about this whole process of reincarnation is that, well, and I've dealt with near-death studies, and memories, people have had memories, and some people with trained regressionists have been taken back to a perfect life in the past, say the 18th century, and they go from that to another life that's absolutely totally at odds against the one that they had. And, you know, we forget between each incarnation and reincarnation cycle. So I think a lot of what we've been told is not everything. Because in terms of the incarnation, reincarnation process, I don't get it. We keep coming back here and we're going round in circles. We don't, you know, okay, we have an experience, we go back, we write it. Yeah, let's write it. Okay, for experience, let's go into Auschwitz. I'm sorry, people say don't talk about it, it happened. You find yourself in Auschwitz. You find yourself in a third world country. You find yourself poor with struggling parents. I can't get my head round it. And as a clairvoyant medium, I don't deal with past lives, but I've asked people, what do you think about this? And they're like, well, I don't know. Something's gone wrong. So I think there's a spiritual battle within the earth, and these ultra-terrestrial, interdimensional, extraterrestrial beings, there's something going on. And as I said before, the human seems to be at the crux of this somehow. We seem to be very important to not just the spiritual dimension, but also of interest to the extraterrestrial, interdimensional entities. You understand?
Yeah.
And this is interesting. So it is a good question. I don't doubt that perhaps I have a feeling that I'm not from here, but I can't prove where I'm from. That's still a challenging question in terms of how we can deal with that on an emotional, spiritual and mental level. So yes, it's kind of tough.
Yeah.
Dealing with all the stuff you're dealing with is like, whoa.
One of my friends from New Zealand, Susie Hansen, has wrote a book called Dual Soul Connection. In that book, she's representing that kind of idea that those alien souls can have a connection to our human souls and kind of affecting our life and work through us. What do you think about that idea?
You know what? I am not going to dismiss any idea. And the reason I'm not going to dismiss that, we have to be open to all forms of conjecture, to all forms of theoretical debate. When, for instance, my theory was published back in '96, they called it revolutionary. There are those within the UFO community who are less than kind, and they have to be right. They'll tell you how it is. We don't know. For the record, we have to be open. Why not? It's a possibility. Yeah. We have to be open because is there the book of life that tells us everything? No. So I think it's really wonderful that there are other researchers with their thoughts and ideas.
Yeah.
And if they're central to that reality, then good luck to them. That is their realm. That's the way that they see things. The big problem that we have at the moment on this planet is that everyone is trying to squeeze everything into the same box.
Yes.
It won't go there. In terms of memory, the other strange thing that I used to have, and I still have, is that you could be somewhere and all of a sudden where you are, it could be a fraction of a second that where you are seems to open up memories of somewhere else that you have a connection with. Larger realities based upon the one that you're in. It's hard to describe in words, but you know, that is a very interesting idea, yeah.
When I was listening to your lecture today, I noticed that you have quite many that kind of experience from UFOs and aliens, which I noticed that it's quite dark,
Yes.
or bad,
Understood.
or that way,
Yes.
that you haven't got any good connection or good experiences from those.
No.
What do you think?
No, well, one person from America said to me that the only reason that you've had negative experiences with these extraterrestrials is because you're a negative person. Let me remind you, I am the least negative person. I'm, I'm very analytical. I'm very open and very fair with my judgments. And who am I? Here's the guy that has had this abduction. How crazy does that look? But I'm central to my beliefs. I'm central to the core of the truth. But yes, it's worrying because the experiences I had were shocking. And when I go back, for instance, the Foo Fighter thing that we saw when we were 13, I mean, that shocked us. It wasn't kind of like, horrible or nasty. It was so different. It was like something from Doctor Who. I mean, something has displaced your reality because you're so used to the so-called norm, and then this thing presents itself and it's like, well, hang on just a minute, what is this? The 1989 abduction was raw. Was raw. And people, when I was invited, I've never invited myself anywhere or anything. I've always been invited.
Yes.
I'm quite happy to talk. But in the younger days, I was very naive. You're honest and open, and the media, well, I was a circus for them. Come on this program here and tell us what happened. We'll understand. They didn't. That hurt.
Yes.
And when you are in the presence of what we call extraterrestrials, as it were, and crazy, right, 3 reptilians, 8-foot reptilians, all I got from them was the most horrible feeling that I was just a piece of meat. I was nothing.
That's hurt.
Yeah. But then, of course, then what hurts is you get people telling you what they are, where they're from, even their high command. I lose the plot, you understand?
Yeah.
So, and someone else said to me, it's because your soul's deserving of it. I'm like, no, hang on just a minute. So I don't know. I have always wanted, and let me tell you, people, when you're dealing with ufology or psychic phenomena, because you're creative as well, in the old days, you'll walk to slippery rope. Oh, he writes books. Oh, he's written children's books. He's written science fiction, like you've got to be put in a bracket. No. They actually draw to creative people, intelligent people. That's what they draw to.
Yeah.
I always yearned for contact that was beautiful, from beautiful people coming out of a ship that would heal you or make you eternal in terms of physicality, that you could fall in love with them, really.
Yeah, that would be nice.
Yeah, and absolutely. But I, like some people, no, that's never happened to me. Never.
Yes.
And the encounters themselves have been very sporadic in nature. I talk about the experiences from one to the other. People say, you've had a lot of them. Well, yes, there have been a few. but not that many. But those that have happened have been up close and personal, let me tell you.
Yeah.
There have been other sightings that were very odd, but I didn't consider worthy of recording because so many people have seen tumbling triangles through the air or lights in the distance. What happened to us, the ones that are reported, were the meat of it. But so I never wanted to become a medium. Maybe I did from the other side. I never wanted to be contacted from extraterrestrials unless they were benevolent, loving beings, and they weren't on my mind when that happened. So it's interesting, isn't it? I think that we are a multitude or a composite of many different parts on a human soul level, but also on a non-human level, because we try and put everything into the human. Even the other side, oh, mum and dad, grandma and granddad, oh, they're all over there, lovely. Where's the extraterrestrials? Do they go through a process of incarnation, reincarnation? Are they there as well? Are we part of that? We don't know.
Yeah. Well, this is interesting, and if I understood right, that those contact what you have had aliens has also happened in as a astral state.
Yes.
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 And this doesn't make any difference for your experiences.
No. In fact, the 1989 event, when the abduction happened, there was one part during the late evening going into the night that happened on a solid level of integration, the appearance of light, the atmosphere changing, my brother going into a trance saying there's going to be an earthquake or grandma's going to die, the situation being set and this light and the glass changing and this grey type all dressed in black thing coming through the door and running through the house and then disappearing. And then in the morning, early hours of the morning, don't know, did I see a clock? No. I had a feeling it's probably about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, finding myself in the hall floating on my back, then being pulled by an invisible force through solid matter. It was always through the doors, always through glass. And, you know, we're all important, but I've written books on psychic phenomena and ufology, researching, and I had 2 experiences, only 2, where I have seen 2 dead people manifest, physically manifest, but behind glass. The grey thing came through glass.
Yes.
I was going through glass. This whole thing within the abduction to the other last grey that looked more like Noddy, a children's character from Enid Blyton. It wasn't Noddy, but the grey was really strange. You know, how the hell am I able to get through locked and bolted doors? How is that possible? I knew there was the key. That was where the key was. But he wouldn't tell me because he kind of like didn't, if I say malfunctioned, he looked shocked and then raised his head up and started to rasp this unintelligible language that sounded more like the voice synthesizer to our cheetah ZX81 that we had back in the day, and mimicking what my brother had done earlier that evening when he said there's going to be an earthquake or grandma's going to die. Another researcher, Pierre Sabac, found that connection. I forgot all about it. That's why I say when you have an experience, to be honest, keep to the facts, don't change anything. He found it. It's like, well, that's weird. So that grey was mimicking what my brother was doing. Why was it doing it? And that's spooky. That's disturbing.
How your brother was thinking about this thing? Has he had any nice experience from those?
No, he
similar than you.
Yes, now what's interesting is that in when we were 13 years of age, in 1982, where after the silver orb had been seen by us both and our grandmother, my brother has documented his abduction. I tried to keep his away from mine because we're twins.
Yes.
And people then tend to say, oh, you've had this, and they get us mixed up.
Yeah. Well.
So it's like, no, I know mine and Ronnie knows his. He had one abduction, one. Very different from mine, but in 1982 in the later part. And they were with doctors in suits. He was taken through the house, through the roof. He'll explain the story to you. But he was in a medical environment. They were nice to him, very different from mine, but they were all armoured in like masks and everything. And there was an operating table. I think there were 3 of them waiting for him. He knew he was in a wheelchair, and the being behind him spoke perfect English. And my brother remembered that he was shocked because when the doctor had said to him, "We're going to perform an operation on you, Ronald." And my brother froze because the being knew his name, and everyone calls my brother Ronnie. Only Ronald when there's a teacher or a parent,
Yes.
when you're being bad.
Yeah. Yes.
So he had his experience, and then when he was brought back down, it's haunted him, the image of a Cheshire cat, a really nasty, ugly Cheshire cat, when he's brought back through the ceiling to his bed in our room. I didn't see it because they knock you out. I remembered all about it. He was scared to hell. He used to put doors on his back when he slept and a guitar by the door because he thought that this force would come in, but it got him through the roof. But this whole hologram of this cat, this nasty Cheshire cat, he believes was an insurance policy from them. If he went to a doctor and said, I've had this experience, I think I've been abducted by aliens 13 years ago, through the roof and seeing these doctors, and then doctor, I saw a hologram of the Cheshire cat. Oh, you've been watching too much of Alice in Wonderland. The force is clever. The intelligence behind it knows how to cover itself. So he had one main abduction. I also had one in 1989, and his was much earlier in 1982, later in that year, but earlier than me in terms. And what's interesting is 7 years apart, because I'm 7 minutes older than my brother. I'm not saying that the extraterrestrials measure our abductions by time through years. No. But there may have been other abductions with us. We're certain of that. But we know they happened, but we cannot report it because if you have no memory of it, there's no point in bringing it forward. And I've not been to a regressionist. I've not been regressed. My brother remembered his, I remembered mine. Strange that, isn't it?
Well, it is, and also that our mind is turning those things sometimes better than they usually are, or totally different than they are.
Yes.
And or traumas, what we have had, they even make it worse. But let's not forget also that when we are in a spiritual level, we are not talking about so much demonic forces, but does it exist?
Well, good and evil do exist, and this is like going back into the antediluvian cultures. This is going back into the original codices, or the version that we have, heaven and hell. Well, I believe in the astral planes. I believe that a lot of this phenomena is generated from there. Interesting, the dogman, Sasquatch, able to penetrate through to our dimension very easily and then go out again. They can match their vibration frequencies, so their interaction for a brief period of time. And also I've looked into, and I've mentioned this in my new book, Terrestrial Trespassers, where when UFOs or cryptids coming, there's no sound. There's no sound.
Well.
And so the phenomena is obviously operating on a same level, a principle. That's telltale signs. So I do believe that there are evil forces. I don't understand as humans that we have that capacity as well. That as a human, we have to balance ourselves between good and bad. Sometimes you get so angry you could do something, but you don't. It's true.
And in war, probably everybody else.
Absolutely. You can't blame the man with the rifle and the helmet, because if he doesn't do it, he's going to get shot. He's following orders. I believe at that point, you know, getting away from all this judgment and all the rest of it when we pass over, they're absolved anyway because it comes from in here. But I do believe in a darker force. Yes, I do.
Yeah.
I believe that.
Do you think that those aliens who have abducted you are behind of that?
That is very interesting. Good question, another good question I can't answer, but I'll give you this. At the moment in our world, the elite seem to be ruled by something else. Because every time they come into power, they tell you one thing and they do exactly what the opposite. And they seem to be following an agenda. And I've always had this thought that we operate on different levels of vibration. So you will shine brighter than another person because that other person, God loved them. is doing a 9 to 5 job, nothing wrong with that, and they're programmed by the system. They're happy. They're happy, lovely. Isn't it wonderful? But you've changed because you're asking questions, you've had experiences. So something's changed in your vibrational energy. And those, whatever they are, come in. They're checking you out, you see? So it could be a program where we could take it any number of ways, that this darker force, I mean, there are good forces as well, but this darker force that's in control is trying to subjugate us, to keep the energy down, to keep us locked in this reality. Obviously a benefit to them on some level, whatever that is.
Yeah.
And if we start to become different, you've had things happen to you and it's like, or psychic things start to unravel, they may come in and say, right, let's abduct you and let's see what you're about. Let's see what's different about you on a quantum level, on a spiritual level. Let's see what's making you tick, what's making you work. Do you see what I mean? But I do believe in the good forces as well. I just haven't, unfortunately, other than the spirit part, I haven't met them.
Well, you had a theory in your lecture that, example, those greys, they are probably cloned, and that's why they have lost their, if they ever had a humanity or compassion or that kind of emotional skills.
Yes, that's right. I mean, 1996, I had a download. It was the only ever time I had it. It was at work. I kept thinking since the abduction, how did they do it? How did they do what they did? How can they take me through? And then it was like, bang. And then I furiously wrote this whole theory out. And it's possible that with the greys, for instance, they cannot reproduce, so we understand. But they're interested, I was thinking, hang on a minute, but they're interested in people, in us as a human species that can reproduce. And when I was abducted, I didn't see any reproduction or hybridization going on, but that comes into the equation because of the research. And I thought, well, hang on, why are they creating a hybrid? Now, I met Dr. David Jacobs in America years ago, and he's got his own thoughts about that, fine. But I was thinking, well, why are they interested? And I thought, hang on a minute. Well, they must have cancelled themselves out of their own reproductive program. And as we know, we understand that through reproduction, we bring memory, perhaps our sovereignty from source. If I cloned you 100 times and you didn't go through the normal birthing process, what will happen to you when you pass? Will you just fizzle out, or will you be floating around somewhere? I just excuse the pun. So it could be that these greys have cancelled themselves out of creation, have amalgamated themselves into one Mivhine consciousness, and then found us as species that can reproduce. Yeah, we need to get back to where we're going. We need what we want. We want back what we've lost. They found a species, and they're like, well, what are these? These humans, they can reproduce, they have a spark of something that we don't have. We want a bit of that. Or let's take the theory even further. And in my book, Terrestrial Trespassers, not book dropping here or name dropping, but it's important to acknowledge. In the original codices, in the ancient codices, it is said that we were the result of bioengineering, DNA manipulation from extraterrestrials, that our gods were responsible in creating the Adama, the man, through in the infusion of perhaps the mammal. It would make sense. Earth, kind of like, and spirit, fire and water, whatever. And there was, I think, Zicherin had stated, and other scholars as well too, that the gods primarily forbade their creation, the Adama, to mate, to reproduce. And then, of course, the gods had an argument because they wanted us to reproduce because they wanted more workforce. That's the way it goes. But what if those same gods had created before the Adama, before the human, a species like the greys that could not reproduce? And they are now looking for their gods.
That has been a very interesting interview, but actually our time is now coming up. So it's I hope very best for you.
Thank you.
And I'm sorry that this ended so quickly.
That's fine. It's been really wonderful to talk to you, and I think we've had a really great discussion. We've got a lot in there, haven't we?
I think so too.
Absolutely, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.